The birthday cake hit the floor, thrown by my own daughter. "Act your age, mother," Chelsea sneered, fists still shaking. She didn't know I'd already disinherited her, didn't know I'd caught her stealing from my trust, didn't know the guests watched her crumble. Not me. And she sure as hell didn't know. This was the party I'd been waiting years to end. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The candles were still lit when the cake hit the floor, and so was something inside me, something old and tired that finally split open and stopped pretending. Chocolate ganache smeared across my sensible shoes, pooling like blood on the hardwood. Frosting splattered across the hem of my skirt. I looked down at it all, ruined, ridiculous, perfectly poetic. Gasps echoed around the room like popping balloons. Someone muttered, "Did she just—" And another whispered, "What the hell, Chelsea?" Across the room, the Bluetooth speaker kept playing an upbeat jazz track, clueless to the fracture it had just accompanied. Chelsea stood over me, jaw clenched, hands shaking slightly, not from remorse, but from rage. Her manicured fingers twitched like she wanted to take back the motion, but pride held her in place. "Act your age, mother," she hissed, loud enough for every guest to hear. "This isn't a stand-up set." I straightened, brushing frosting from my hands like dried petals. "Then maybe don't throw me a party if you don't like how I celebrate," I said softly. But my voice wasn't what they noticed. It was my smile. Because I didn't flinch, I didn't cry, I didn't even scold her. I smiled like I'd just solved a puzzle that had been tormenting me for decades, and in a way, I had. It had started earlier in the evening. Chelsea's idea of a birthday party for her 70-year-old mother looked more like a real estate open house. White tulips, neutral-toned candles, hors d'oeuvres arranged like military formations. Everything curated, sterile, controlled. Her husband Gavin had made a speech about family legacy, my legacy, but not once did he say my name. When I joked with James, the 20-something neighbor who'd helped me carry groceries once and was now charming everyone with his bartender skills, Chelsea's mouth tightened. She hadn't liked me laughing, she hadn't liked me being visible, and now, standing in a ring of frosting and crumbs, she'd made her move. But I wasn't the one humiliated. She was. Chelsea turned away to gather herself, issuing a half-hearted apology to the guests, as if someone had spilled wine rather than dignity. I bent down to pick up the cracked ceramic plate the cake had rested on. One shard had sliced a shallow cut across my palm. I pressed a napkin against it and smiled again. The sting was refreshing. People milled awkwardly, sipping champagne like it might erase what they'd witnessed. But the silence that followed was heavier than the sound. I caught James's eye from across the room. He mouthed, "Are you okay?" I nodded once, folding the napkin over the cut, the sugar, the shame. Earlier that week I'd sat with a different kind of paper. Legal paper. The will had been changed. Cam, my late husband's godson, who'd grown up calling me Auntie M and returned from the service with quiet strength and sharper eyes, had replaced Chelsea as the executor. Everything, from the family property to the antique book collection, had been reassigned. I hadn't told Chelsea. I'd simply prepared. Let her perform for her followers, her pity parties, her neighbors who still believed she was the devoted daughter caring for a declining mother. Let her take selfies with the framed photo of me on the piano like I was already gone. Let her throw a party in my name. Let her show her hand. When the last guest left, trailing unease like perfume, Chelsea swept past me, already texting someone, likely composing her defense. I touched her arm. She turned, startled, as if I'd spoken Latin. I leaned in, just enough for only her to hear. "You just gifted me clarity," I whispered. "And I don't return gifts." She blinked, momentarily confused, as though she hadn't noticed the way the room had turned against her. As though a mother's smile couldn't be sharper than any slap. I turned and walked into the kitchen, the trail of my frosting slick soles whispering behind me like the first steps toward something long overdue. The living room was still faintly scented with vanilla frosting and smoke from the extinguished candles, but the party was long gone, like the illusion it masked. I kicked off my shoes at the door and walked slowly to the corner cabinet. The oak creaked as I opened it, dust lifting in the air like unsettled ghosts. Behind stacked linens and neatly folded quilts sat a cedar chest, scuffed from decades of movement and memory. I pulled it out, one box at a time, and lined them on the rug like milestones, labeled in my careful, looping script. Chelsea, age 1. Chelsea, age 2. Chelsea, age 3. 38 boxes, one for each birthday until she married Gavin. After that, I stopped. The boxes were small, handmade things. Inside, a hospital bracelet, a finger painting, a crayon-scrawled card that read, "I love you bigger than cake," the receipt from the bookstore where I bought her first Nancy Drew novel, the letter I wrote her the day her father died, never sent, just folded, tear-stained, buried in the age 9 box. I ran my fingers over each one, the cardboard soft at the corners. My hands trembled, not from age, but from something colder. Recognition. I had kept the record of a life built with love. Chelsea had built a new one without it. She hadn't said a word after the cake. No apology, not even a text. Just silence that rang louder than anything she'd shouted at the party. I stood, bones aching, and crossed the room to my roll-top desk. Inside the top drawer sat the red folder, Will Revision, Confidential. Flashback, 1993. My husband, Ray, had been gone 4 months. Chelsea was 15, locked in her room with headphones on, pretending grief didn't apply to her. I'd taken a second job at the library just to keep the heat on. I remembered packing her lunch one morning with a note tucked between the sandwich and apple slices. "I'm proud of you, even when it's hard." It came back unopened, no comment, just crumbs and silence. Back in the present, I heard my cell buzz, low and distant in the kitchen. I walked slowly toward it, expecting a spam call or a condolence text from one of the neighbors. It was Daniel, my lawyer. I answered, steadying myself against the counter. "Marilyn," he said gently, "you still want to proceed with the revisions?" I looked toward the chest. 38 years of unconditional love, boxed and shelved like a library no one checked out anymore. "Yes," I said, "finalize everything, including the air change." Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this before talking to her?" "She made herself clear yesterday," I replied. "It's time I do the same." After the call, I pulled a fresh sheet of paper from the desk. No printer, no email, just ink and hand and weight. To whom it may concern, let her earn her legacy. Not steal it. Marilyn Rhodes. I sealed the letter and tucked it into a small manila envelope marked private. I'd deliver it to the safe deposit box in the morning. As I logged into the shared trust portal to double-check account transfers, I expected to see what I had left untouched for years. A balanced ledger, maybe a few small distributions. Instead, I saw a new line repeated like a drumbeat down the page. Withdrawal, property consulting, $11,200. Withdrawal, property consulting, $7,350. Withdrawal, property consulting, $18,900. My fingers hovered over the mouse. The totals added up fast. Too fast. My throat tightened. I clicked into the details. Recipient, Gavin Rhodes, LLC. Next day I went to my financial planner's office. The receptionist offered me tea as I stepped into the mahogany-trimmed office, but the knot in my stomach didn't leave space for comfort. I declined with a tight smile and took a seat across from Thomas Keene, my financial planner of 15 years. His collar was pressed, his glasses spotless, but something in his posture had changed, an unease behind his usual confidence. "I pulled the reports you requested, Marilyn," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "You were right to be suspicious." My hands didn't tremble. I was past trembling. I flipped open the folder and scanned the neatly printed pages, columns of dates, transaction codes, and distribution notes. Then I saw it. Account 003, Secondary Investment Holding, SSN::-8471. Primary account holder, Marilyn Rhodes. Authorized agent, Chelsea Rhodes. I blinked slowly. I never authorized a third account. Thomas nodded grimly. "It was opened 2 years ago. All the identity verifications were digital. Biometrics, yes, but easily spoofed if someone had your details, which I assume your daughter did. And Gavin? I asked. He hesitated. He registered a business, Mountain Stay Holdings, LLC, as a co-investor. They took out a private equity loan using that third account as the collateral. The address tied to it is your estate. The paper beneath my fingers felt suddenly thick, like damp cardboard. I turned another page, transaction logs showing deposits labeled personal trust transfer, and withdrawals labeled interior rehab, guest installation, luxury linens. Short-term rentals, Thomas confirmed. They're building a boutique mountain property, already booking weekends on Airbnb. The air grew tight around me. I could hear the hum of the ceiling vent, smell the antiseptic tang of commercial floor cleaner, feel the fire crawling behind my ribs. Chelsea's cruelty hadn't been chaotic. It had been orchestrated. I'd mistaken temper for impulse. But every outburst, every dig about downsizing or legacy planning had been rehearsals. I closed the folder and leaned back in the chair, staring at the beams above Thomas's desk. Memory ambushed me, one I hadn't touched in years. Flashback, 2006, 3 months after Ray's funeral. I was still answering condolence cards, still folding his sweaters into boxes I couldn't bear to seal. Chelsea came over one afternoon, freshly 29 and radiant in a wine-colored dress. We sat with tea on the porch swing. She reached across the table and touched my hand gently. "Mom," she said, voice dipped in compassion, "have you thought about updating the will? You know, just in case?" I remember blinking. "In case of what?" She smiled like a woman performing vulnerability. "Well, you're alone now. It's only smart to plan ahead." That was the first time, and I saw it now for what it was, the seed of strategy. I left Thomas's office with the folder clutched to my chest like a funeral program. On the ride home, I called Lenora. "Are you free tonight?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "I'll bring wine, and my scanner." Lenora had been a paralegal before she retired, sharp as ever, with a memory that could quote case law like scripture. We spread the records across my dining table, bank printouts, notarized documents, deeds. I highlighted signatures that didn't match mine. We cross-referenced property transfers with state filing dates. By the second hour, the wine was still untouched. There was no space for celebration in violation. Lenora pulled out her portable printer from a worn canvas bag and clicked open a metal drawer from her binder kit. She rifled through, then paused. "This," she said, pulling out a packet with a worn tab. "This isn't just misuse. This is criminal." I looked up. "You have enough here," she added, "to bury them in court, but we'll do it with precision, quietly, legally, and permanently." I set the dining table with my mother's china, the one Chelsea always said felt too antique for Instagram. The silverware gleamed beneath the amber light of the chandelier. Fresh roses sat in a vase at the center, their scent curling through the air like memory. In the corner, a wine rack held 2 opened bottles, Gavin's favorite Merlot and the Riesling Chelsea used to pretend to like before she developed a taste for power. But I didn't pour the wine right away. I needed their tongues loose first. What they didn't see were the discreet black boxes embedded between the books on the shelf, tucked behind the clock and underneath the coffee table. Motion activated, HD audio, clear as breath. Lenora helped me test them all the night before. At 6:58 p.m., a black Lexus pulled into the driveway. I stood by the window, breathing slowly, willing myself into stillness. Chelsea entered first. Burgundy sheath dress, perfect waves, a smile like she'd never shattered a cake or a memory. Gavin followed, navy blazer crisp, lips tight, hands casually possessive on her waist. "You didn't have to do all this," Chelsea said, glancing at the crystal glasses like they were relics from a museum she didn't care to visit. "Oh, it's just a little reset," I said. "We all said some things that didn't come out quite right." I gestured to the couch. "Sit, please." I handed them drinks. Gavin sniffed his wine like it was beneath him, then took a generous sip. We made it through salad, barely, before the veneer cracked. "So," Chelsea said, swirling her glass, "what's the plan now? You healing up?" Thinking about moving into something easier? I tilted my head. You mean like assisted living? She laughed too quickly. Well, not yet, obviously, but you've got that guest cottage just sitting there. Gavin leaned forward. We had an idea. It's honestly a smart move. Convert the guest house into an Airbnb annex. Low maintenance, high return. We already started drafting some design ideas. And where would I be? I asked lightly. He smiled like a man proud of a PowerPoint. Main house for now. But long term, there's this beautiful retirement village in Highlands. Pool, shuttle service, the works. Chelsea added, We already met with the rep. She said you'd qualify, no problem. I held my glass but didn't drink. My fingers were steady. And you'd be managing the property? Of course, Gavin said. You don't need to deal with listings and guests. It took everything in me not to grin. Instead, I reached into my cardigan pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped play. Their voices filled the room, lifted from the recordings earlier that week when they thought I was asleep upstairs. Chelsea calling me a sunsetting liability. Gavin laughing about turning her little library room into a spa suite. Chelsea went rigid. Gavin's expression flattened. What is this? She asked, voice sharp, brittle. Insurance, I said. You're insane, she hissed. This is entrapment. I leaned back in my chair. Oh, honey, entrapment is when someone encourages you to commit a crime. You were just talking. Gavin stood. This is toxic. This is why she needs supervision. I rose calmly. The party's over, and I have the tapes, the records, the trust logs. Keep pushing, and I'll have them heard in court. Chelsea's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. I smiled. You slapped a cake out of my hands in front of 40 people. I think we're past daring. She grabbed her clutch, stormed toward the door, muttering something under her breath. Gavin lingered a moment longer. You're overdue for assisted living, he said, smirking. You just proved it. Then he left. I didn't move, not until I heard the car start, not until the taillights disappeared down the hill. I cleared the wine glasses, emptying them into the sink. The Riesling was sweet and untouched. The Merlot reeked of vinegar. The next morning I opened my mailbox and found a thick white envelope, certified, return receipt requested. Inside, a formal petition, filed by Gavin B. Whitmore. Subject, petition for emergency mental incompetency evaluation, Marilyn Rhodes. The waiting room at the evaluation clinic smelled like antiseptic and something colder, like paperwork meant to erase a person. The walls were a dull beige, made duller by the silence. A woman in scrubs called my name. I stood, smoothing my slacks, and followed her into the dim hallway without a cane, without hesitation. They wanted me to crack, to forget the year, the date, my name, to fumble my way through a questionnaire like a lost child in her own mind. They wanted frailty. What they got was fury sharpened by literacy. I sat across from a man in tortoiseshell glasses who introduced himself as Dr. Rollins. He smiled in that rehearsed, gentle way designed to coax confessions. This is a standard evaluation, Mrs. Rhodes. No pressure, no consequence. Liar. Spell world backward, he began. I did. Now subtract 7 from 100 until I tell you to stop. 93, 86, 79, 72, 65, 58, 51. Should I go on, or are we satisfied? He blinked, then scribbled something. His tone softened. Do you know why you're here? I smiled, crisp and cool. Because my daughter married a man who's more interested in real estate than reality, and together they decided I'd be more useful in a facility than in my own home. He paused, then asked, Do you feel safe? Absolutely, I said, leaning forward. Because I know the law, and because I have people. That afternoon, Lenora picked me up in her Honda Civic, heated seats running and a large coffee waiting in the cup holder. I held the doctor's stamped clearance letter in my lap like a trophy. No flags, I said, not even a maybe. Lenora smirked. I didn't think there would be. But now that we have this, let's talk about locking down your life. Back at her kitchen table, we spread out folders like blueprints for a war. The revocation of power of attorney came first. Lenora slid the form toward me, already half filled. This terminates their access. We file it with the clerk tomorrow. Next came the trust. "You've got every right to redirect your estate," she said. "They built a house on sand, and you're about to take the tide in." "Cam," I said, tapping my pen against the table. "He's back." Lenora's eyebrows rose. "From the Marines?" "Just got discharged, honorably. He's staying in Black Mountain for a bit. Charles trusted him. So do I." By dusk, we had everything outlined, my new heir named, foundation documents in draft, and a full lockout plan underway. We clinked mugs of peppermint tea like generals over bourbon. The next morning, I met Cam at the diner near the train depot, booths covered in red vinyl, the scent of fried eggs floating like history. He stood when he saw me, still lean, still stoic, his jaw squared with both age and restraint. But when I hugged him, he hugged back with the warmth of someone who still remembered who loved him first. "I hear you've had a hell of a year," he said. "You too," I replied. "I've got a proposition." We walked, slowly, down toward the lake trail. I told him everything. Chelsea, the LLC, the mental health petition, the revocation. His face didn't move much, but when I mentioned naming him in the new trust, his breath caught. "I never wanted a penny," he said. "But I won't let them destroy you." Then came the twist I didn't expect. "Gavin approached me 4 years ago," Cam said quietly. "Said if I signed over the deed to a parcel of land Charles left me, he'd cut me in on a development. Called it family reinvestment. I told him to shove it." I stopped walking. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because back then, I figured Chelsea would wise up. I didn't think it'd get this bad." We sat on a bench. I stared at the water, wind teasing ripples across the surface like secrets just beneath. That evening, I signed the final documents. Notarized, filed, scanned and backed up to 3 encrypted drives. Cam sat beside me as Lenora submitted everything. I slept well that night, until the next morning. My phone buzzed at 6:14 a.m. I rubbed my eyes, checked the notification. Bank alert. Transaction failed. Insufficient funds. I opened the app. My primary checking account. Frozen. A second text followed. "Chelsea R. has initiated fraud lock for account safety pending conservatorship outcome." The tap wouldn't run. The thermostat blinked like it didn't recognize me. The fridge hummed with quiet betrayal, but everything inside was already warm. I pressed the light switch 3 times, then a 4th. Habit before hope. Nothing. The power was out. My phone buzzed with an alert from my utility provider. "Service suspended billing issue." I checked my bank app. Again. Still locked. My heart didn't race. It settled, coldly, precisely, like a match struck in a snowstorm. I lit a candle from the emergency drawer and dialed Lenora. "She shut down everything," I said. "Electric, gas, water, all tied to the primary account." Lenora didn't curse, but I heard her jaw tighten. "They're pushing you toward a breakdown, classic coercive tactic. I won't give them the pleasure." By dusk, I'd packed 1 suitcase and the shoebox that held all my legal and estate documents. I slid into a gray windbreaker, tossed a ball cap over my silver hair, and walked out the back door. Not a victim, not a runaway. Just a woman exiting the theater of someone else's control. The boutique hotel in downtown Asheville sat 2 blocks off the main strip, behind a stone wall and hydrangea bushes. The clerk didn't bat an eye when I checked in under my maiden name, Marilyn Boone. My room smelled of cedar and lavender, the kind of place where guests drank herbal tea and paid in cash. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I hadn't been missing. I'd been erased. The next morning, I made my way to a coffee shop with stable Wi-Fi and an old name I'd been keeping in my back pocket for a moment like this. Ivy De Silva, a freelance reporter from the Asheville Chronicle. She'd written a piece 2 years ago about a nursing home scandal. Quiet, sharp, damning. She picked up on the first ring. "Ms. Rhodes," she said, her voice low and clear. "I've been waiting for your call." We met at a corner booth by the window. I handed over a thumb drive. She inserted it into her laptop and started clicking. Audio clips of Chelsea mocking my memory, bank documents with signatures that weren't mine, a screenshot of Gavin's Airbnb annex design pitch titled Sunset Cottage, passive income from parental legacy. Ivy looked up. "You've been building a case?" "I was a librarian for 40 years. I know how to catalog betrayal." She nodded slowly. This isn't just emotional, it's financial elder abuse, and it's not uncommon. We talked for 2 hours. By the end, Ivy was already mapping out an exposé. 3-part series, local to national. You okay with that kind of heat? I smiled. Let's melt their ice. That night, while the world posted filtered brunch photos and wellness quotes, Chelsea uploaded a black and white picture of us from the early 90s. Me, younger. Her, grinning with missing teeth and red Kool-Aid around her mouth. Caption, "My mom's missing. Please help me bring her home." I laughed, dry and sharp. Lenora texted, "Have you seen what she just posted?" I replied with a photo of my tea and the hotel window view. Not lost, just watching. The next morning, I mailed Chelsea a letter, handwritten, no return address. You forgot. I taught you how to keep records. And I kept everyone. Thursday came. Ivy sent final proof for the article's first drop. I read it at the same table we'd met. Headline, "The daughter who planned her mother's funeral too early." The photos were damning, the quotes worse, the evidence irrefutable. As I signed the digital release form, my phone buzzed with a message from Ivy. "Drops happening Friday. Are you ready for impact?" By 7:02 a.m. Friday, the article was live. Ivy's headline cut through morning coffee and weather scrolls like a scalpel, "The daughter who planned her mother's funeral too early." The subheading didn't flinch either. Financial abuse, family betrayal, and the woman who refused to disappear. Within minutes, the comments were rolling in. Rapid-fire empathy, outrage, disbelief. Then came the shares. Thousands. I sat in my hotel room, still in my robe, the mug of chamomile cooling beside me as the page refreshed over and over. 37,000 views in the first hour, then 60, then 85. By noon, we were past 250,000. I hadn't expected it to feel like anything, but it did. Relief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet realization that someone else finally sees the bruise beneath your sleeve. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Unknown numbers, emails, DMSA message from Good Morning Asheville. Another from the News and Observer. National wires were picking it up. Ivy texted, "CNN wants to speak with you. We hold off or you ready?" I typed back, "Let them call." But they're not getting tears. Meanwhile, the damage rippled outward. Chelsea's name began trending regionally. Her polished real estate bio, the one with that too white smile, was yanked from her agency's website by mid-afternoon. Word spread fast. Comments flooded her listings. "Is this the woman who robbed her mother blind? Can't trust someone who betrays blood. I'd never buy a house from a grave robber." By 3, her employer had placed her on leave pending an internal investigation. Translation, they were preparing to cut her loose. Gavin didn't fare much better. His custom home building site, sleek and bloated with claims about ethical craftsmanship, was hacked by evening. The homepage replaced with a looped quote from his recorded voice, "She's a sun-setting liability." I chuckled, walking through Asheville's Pack Square Park as the winter wind tugged at my scarf. No one looked at me. No one knew the woman beneath the hooded coat was the reason their phones were buzzing. And yet, I felt seen. A family of 4 strolled past me. The mother smiled, oblivious, but the little girl, freckles and pink mittens, looked up at me and waved. It unraveled me in the best way. Later that night, I logged into a crowdfunding page Ivy had quietly set up that morning. Goal: $15,000 for legal fees and trust litigation support. Raised $23,410 in 9 hours. Top comment: "For every mom they tried to silence." I shut the laptop and leaned back into the pillow. Not because it was over, but because the balance had finally begun to shift. Then, Chelsea's post hit. Ivy was the first to message me. "Brace yourself." I clicked the link. The video auto-played. Chelsea sat in soft light, mascara running, hair intentionally tousled. Her voice trembled almost convincingly. "My mom? She's not telling the whole story. You don't know what it was like. She was never easy, always dramatic. This is breaking our family apart. A sob. "I just wanted to help her." The comments were split. Some rallied, others saw through her. But one line stuck with me more than the rest. "She's twisting the truth just to hurt me." I stared at the screen, expressionless. Let her cry. Let her plead. Because unlike her, I wasn't performing. I wasn't twisting. I was straightening the record. 2 days later, I went to the local television studio. The makeup artist dabbed gently at the corner of my mouth. "You look powerful," she whispered. I didn't feel powerful. I felt precise. Under the studio lights of WNCV Asheville, my bones settled into the chair like it belonged to me. The anchor, Holly Navarro, smiled politely, flipping through a clipboard stacked with questions she probably wouldn't need. They were going to ask about the cake, about the daughter, about the betrayal, but I was ready, because this wasn't a rebuttal, it was a record correction. The segment aired live at 6 p.m. sharp, a steady 2-camera shot, warm-toned, cozy. Holly opened soft. "You've become somewhat of a voice for elder independence in the last week, Marilyn. How did this all start?" I pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat pocket and placed it on the table. A line item on a trust account, labeled Property Consulting, that's what tipped me off. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I laid it out the way you would explain a recipe. Dates, names, bank records, a notarized transfer that wasn't notarized by anyone I'd ever met, the receipts, the videos, the voicemail Gavin had left me, not realizing I had automatic transcription set up. Holly blinked once. "And your daughter claims—" I cut in gently. "She claims I'm twisting the truth. But as you can see," I tapped the manila folder now spread across the desk, "it bends. But it doesn't break." When the segment ended, the studio went quiet. Holly reached over and squeezed my hand. Within hours, my phone hummed with support. Former colleagues from the Asheville Library, parents from Chelsea's old PTA, even my old neighbor Bev, who once accused me of over-sheltering Chelsea as a teen, all of them messaged. Their apologies weren't flowery, but they were honest. "Should have known better. You didn't deserve that. If you ever need anything." The next morning, I launched my first online workshop, Digital Estate Safety for Women 60+. 12 people signed up, then 20, then 90. We covered everything: 2-factor authentication, account visibility, recognizing subtle financial grooming. Some women stayed after the webinar to cry. Some just thanked me. All of them reminded me why I was doing this. Cam helped manage the chat. His jaw tightened every time someone mentioned a daughter or son who'd done the same to them. By the 3rd session, he approached me with a proposal. "I want to start a fund," he said. "Something real. For women like this, recovering from family-induced financial abuse. We'll call it the Safe Loop Trust." He hesitated. "You'll oversee it?" I nodded slowly, heart rising. "With every fiber I've got." Of course, it didn't take Gavin long to strike back. He filed a defamation claim against me and the local news station, claimed I slandered his reputation and jeopardized his company's ability to operate in the Southeast region. Lenora found the court filing hilarious. "Did he forget we have recordings of him calling you a liability with legs?" Tasha shredded his case in discovery. Turns out Gavin had multiple pending contractor violations and 2 unresolved small claims suits already in the books. The judge dismissed it without hearing. Still, I braced myself, because people like Chelsea and Gavin never leave the stage quietly. The knock came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I opened the door to a woman in a trench coat, holding a thin envelope. Her smile was professional, strained. "Are you Marilyn Rhodes?" I nodded. "You've been served." She handed me the envelope and walked off before I could even open it. Inside, Superior Court of Buncombe County Plaintiff Chelsea Rhodes. Claim: emotional distress and damages. Amount: $250,000. No note, no explanation. Just another attempt to rewrite history. The courtroom smelled like varnish and nerves. My shoes clicked louder than I expected on the hardwood floor, the sound somehow accusatory. Chelsea sat across the aisle, carefully powdered, her mouth pursed like she was holding in a sneeze or a scream. I didn't look away. Not once. "Case number 23 CV5470, the bailiff called. Rhodes versus Rhodes. The judge adjusted his glasses and scanned the docket. "Miss Rhodes, Mrs. Rhodes. Let's begin." Chelsea's attorney, a polished brunette named Fallon Wyatt, stood with a folder thick enough to stage a Broadway play. Her voice was syrupy. "Your Honor, this is a deeply personal matter involving intergenerational trauma, emotional neglect, and a daughter who merely sought care for an aging parent." Tasha leaned in and whispered, "Watch this." She rose, all 6 feet of courtroom confidence wrapped in a slate gray blazer and flat heels. "We have documentation proving otherwise. Dozens of bank statements, notarized transfers signed by a woman who was, at the time, hospitalized post-surgery, video footage, screenshots of emails, and a voice recording." She paused, eyes fixed on Fallon. "I'll play it now, with the court's permission." The judge nodded. A grainy recording filled the room. Gavin's voice, "Just let her rot in that hotel, if she hasn't croaked yet. She signs over everything when she gets tired of fighting." A quiet gasp from the back row. Someone shifted in their seat. Chelsea paled. The judge leaned forward. "And this is your client's husband?" Tasha didn't answer. She just let the words hang. Fallon tried to recover. "Even if there were disagreements, that doesn't negate the emotional toll my client has endured from years of—" Tasha cut in, polite but surgical. "Respectfully, Your Honor, emotional toll does not license identity theft, fraudulent asset manipulation, or coercive financial abuse." She handed the judge a stapled packet. Exhibit H, Trust Activity Logs from 2019 to 2022. Multiple withdrawals authorized using a forged power of attorney document. The principal, Ms. Marilyn Rhodes, was not only uninformed but documented as mentally competent throughout. The judge flipped through the documents with a sigh so long I thought he might close the case with it. Fallon shifted, then tried again. "The narrative being constructed here ignores the deep complexity of familial love and pain." "No, it ignores the law," the judge said flatly. He turned to Chelsea. "Mrs. Rhodes, did you file the power of attorney documents in question?" Chelsea's mouth moved, but nothing came out. I thought it was a temporary arrangement," she finally managed, blinking fast, just while she recovered. "Did your mother sign those forms in your presence?" But my husband?" "Thank you." The gavel tapped once. "This court finds no grounds for emotional damages. Claim dismissed." I exhaled slowly. My shoulders, which had held decades of careful restraint, lowered by a single invisible inch. Then the judge turned toward his clerk. "Begin proceedings for a full audit of the Rhodes family trust, immediately." Chelsea looked at me, eyes wide, the mask gone. No smirk, no speeches, just panic. I didn't smile. Not yet. We exited the courtroom in silence, the tension like fog between us. Outside on the stone steps, Tasha pulled me aside. "This isn't over." "What now?" She held up her phone. "I had our forensic tech keep monitoring account movements. Gavin shifted 80 grand last week to a wallet in the Cayman Islands, under a shell name." I stared at her. "He's already running." "Which means he knows what's coming." I nodded slowly, my voice soft but clear. "Then it's time I stop planning quietly." She arched a brow. "You mean?" "I mean it's time to cut them out completely." I looked back at the courthouse, the same one I used to walk past every Sunday on my way to brunch with Chelsea. Back when she still said "I love you" without gritted teeth. I once believed betrayal came slowly, like rust on silver. But it doesn't. It hits like a gavel, fast, final, and echoing. We were in Tasha's office when the call came from the forensic accountant. Her voice was calm, but her words scorched. "Your daughter used your social security number to secure a second mortgage," she said. "A luxury home in Charleston. Closed 6 months ago. You're listed as the co-signer." I didn't breathe for a full 5 seconds. Tasha didn't either. Then she swore under her breath and grabbed her laptop. "Send us every page of that file," she said, already pulling up a frozen assets request. "That's federal fraud, not just state-level abuse." As the documents arrived one by one, PDFs marked with digital seals and my forged signature, something old and sharp inside me clicked into place. This wasn't carelessness, it wasn't desperation, it was strategy. And they had underestimated me. Freeze Gavin's remaining accounts, I said, my voice steady. Every LCL, every holding company, lock it down before they can get creative again. Within an hour, Gavin's portfolio was paralyzed. His personal bank pinged a fraud alert. 2 of his scheduled wire transfers failed. 3 hours later, his firm's website quietly scrubbed him from the team page. "He's done," Tasha muttered, skimming an email from their HR contact. "They saw the audit flag and ran. He's radioactive now." Chelsea was the next domino. The joint marital accounts were locked pending investigation. She couldn't access the Charleston property. She couldn't even pay her attorney without Gavin's business card, and that card had just been cut in half. I stood at the window of the hotel suite, watching the street below. The mountains carved shadows across the pavement. I hadn't felt this weightless in years. "I want everything gone," I said, turning to Tasha. "The Rhodes estate, the living trust, the property allocations, every line that had her name on it, erase it, and replace it with Cam and the foundation." The next day, I visited the memory care facility where I used to volunteer before all this began. A woman named Agnes grabbed my hand in the garden and said, "You smell like honey and confidence." I laughed for the first time in what felt like months. Inside, I watched 2 aides help a retired nurse with a puzzle. No one there wanted to steal anyone's life. They were too busy remembering their own. I knew then, beyond a doubt, I didn't want my legacy wrapped in court battles and cautionary tales. I wanted it to build something that couldn't be taken with a forged pen. By dusk, I had a new will drafted. Every asset redirected to the Rhodes Rebuild Foundation, with Cam as trustee and steward. "Goodbye, inheritance," I whispered, sealing the envelope. "Hello, purpose." It was almost midnight when the knock came at the hotel door. 3 soft raps. I looked through the peephole and wasn't surprised. Chelsea. She was disheveled, makeup streaked, sweater too thin for the cold. In her hand was a manila envelope. Her nails, usually perfect, were chipped down to anxious edges. I opened the door halfway. "5 minutes," she said, voice hoarse. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. She entered like a ghost who still remembered how to haunt. She didn't sit, just hovered near the window like she belonged on the other side of it. "I didn't know," she began, clutching the envelope tighter. I didn't think it would go this far." I said nothing. "I thought we were helping you. Gavin said," he said it, "was only temporary, until you were better." "Stop," I said quietly. "That's what thieves say when the safe's already open." Chelsea crumpled onto the hotel room couch like it had rejected her too. Her eyes were red, her mascara a dark bruise beneath both lids. Her mouth opened, then closed, then trembled into motion. "I didn't know he'd go this far," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I didn't interrupt. I just sat across from her, hands folded in my lap, counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. I was scared. He said we needed the money for investments, that it would all come back tenfold. I didn't know about the second loan. 7, 8, 9. She wrung her hands like she was trying to squeeze the guilt out of her skin. Her voice cracked on the edges. "He told me you wouldn't understand, that you were already slipping. 17, 18, 19. My silence pressed down on the room harder than her sobs. I just wanted a life where I didn't have to worry about everything falling apart again. After Dad died, everything was on me. 32. You were always so strong, so sharp. I thought," she swallowed, "I thought you could afford to give me a little of that strength, just this once." At 83, she finally ran out of words. She looked at me like I was holding her fate in my palms. I suppose, in a way, I was. I stood, walked to the credenza, and opened the drawer where I'd tucked it earlier. A simple folded piece of paper. No envelope, no explanations. I handed it to her wordlessly. Her fingers unfolded it, revealing the yellowing recipe card in my handwriting. "Marilyn's Red Velvet. Birthday only," it read, and scrawled across the bottom in fresh blue ink were the words, "You blew it." Chelsea choked on a sob. Her body buckled inward. But I didn't speak. I didn't soothe. I simply gathered my purse, walked to the door, and opened it wide. She didn't follow. By the time the door clicked shut behind me, I'd reached 300. Later that evening, I sat on my hotel bed, the lamp casting a soft gold pool over the journal on my lap. I opened to the last page of my obituary draft. I took a breath, steady as stone, and added one final line beneath my name. Survived by peace, not by parasites. I closed the book. The knock came 20 minutes later. Not timid, not rushed, just respectful. Cam stood there, arms full of cardboard boxes and a grocery bag slung around one wrist. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. The drive up the winding mountain road was lined with pine and the kind of silence that didn't demand answers. My new house, a single-story cottage with a wide porch and tall windows, sat nestled between trees like it had always belonged to someone who knew how to listen. Cam carried my things in. I made tea. Neither of us said much. Only once I sat down did he finally speak. "You sure you don't want to press charges against her?" "She chose her sentence," I said. "She has to live with it." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. He'd always been the type to protect the things he loved. Now, I was one of them. Outside, the wind stirred the trees gently like breath through paper. Inside, peace pressed itself into the walls, into my chest, into the place where my daughter's voice used to echo. I was home. Just then, Cam's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then looked up at me, eyes wide. "They got him," he said. "Gavin. Booked 15 minutes ago. Identity theft, wire fraud, and 3 counts of elder exploitation." I didn't smile. I just reached for my tea and said, "Good, let justice taste what it's been missing." Inside, peace pressed itself into the walls, into my chest, into the place where my daughter's voice used to echo. I was home. I signed my name with a pen that had survived 3 address changes, 4 decades, and a war of the heart. This time the ink didn't just dry on paper, it sealed a life reclaimed. "That's the last one," said Tasha, flipping the page and handing me the final copy of the new will. Ironclad. They can scream into pillows, but they won't change a word of this. Chelsea and Gavin were not only disinherited, they were legally barred from challenging anything that bore my name. The clause was brutal in its precision. Any attempt to interfere, and all benefits, past, present, or future, are permanently forfeited. Freedom had a shape, a notary seal, a signature, my name, steady as ever. That evening, I hosted the first dinner I'd planned for myself in years. No fake niceties, no glass clinking to pretend affection, just a small table beneath the backyard string lights, each bulb warm and low, like memory made visible. Lenora arrived first, carrying a bottle of red and a lemon tart she made from scratch. "To wipe the taste of betrayal," she said, placing it beside the roasted chicken and fresh rolls I'd baked. Cam followed, bringing flowers wrapped in brown paper and a grin that reminded me of my late husband, the honest kind, where no one's being sold anything. "To Marilyn," Lenora said once we'd filled our glasses, "to the woman who threw her own party," and closed the guest list. Laughter cracked from me like a window finally opened. I leaned back in my chair, the slats pressing gently into my spine. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel like something I had to defend myself from. Over dessert, we joked about turning my story into a book. Cam leaned in, nudging his wine glass aside. "You know what you should call it?" "What?" "Surviving the living." I blinked, then laughed. That's exactly it. That night, I opened my old laptop and began typing Chapter 1 beneath a blinking cursor. Not for publication? Not yet. Just for me. The words came easy, like they'd been waiting for permission to live outside my ribs. I wrote until dawn, only stopping when the cardinals began tapping the feeders on my porch like they'd read the schedule. Later that week, I had copies of my new will stored in 3 locations: my lawyer's office, a private digital vault, and inside the fireproof box beneath my bed. Cam helped me file all the paperwork, including a notarized affidavit about the trust revisions and criminal filings. We made it airtight. No open doors, no legal shadows. My days settled into a rhythm I had once feared: quiet, uneventful, my own. I watered my plants without glancing at my phone. I cooked meals that needed no audience. I let the silence speak, and it never once lied to me. Then, on a rain-slick Tuesday, the mailman rang the doorbell. The envelope was thick, certified, no return address. I sliced it open and unfolded the pages with practiced calm. It was from Chelsea, or more specifically, her lawyer. One sentence was circled. My client is pregnant and intends to petition for her child's inclusion in the Rhodes Family Trust should any assets remain recoverable. I stared at the words for a full minute. Not with fury, not with fear, but with something closer to resolve. My legacy wouldn't be another tug of war. The envelope still sat on my table, its weight more psychological than legal. Pregnant. A single word, heavy with implication, dangling between threat and plea. I held the letter with one hand and gripped my tea with the other. The cup was warm, steady. The letter was neither. People said babies soften things, turn sharp women tender, reckless men careful. But I'd watched Chelsea cradle her ambition with more devotion than she ever gave a doll, a puppy, or even her own mother. I knew better. I'd buried my own mother with secrets still tucked into her apron pockets. I wouldn't let silence carry down the bloodline again. So I wrote, "Dear grandchild," I began, pressing pen to thick stationery with trembling control. "You don't know me yet. Maybe you never will, but you deserve more than the wreckage we built your name on." The letter took 3 days. It wasn't sentimental. It wasn't bitter. It was truth, softened only by hope. I included a copy of a family photo, Chelsea at 6, wearing a red jacket with cookie crumbs on her cheek, and a warning, "Love doesn't entitle anyone to ownership. Remember that when they say it's for your own good." Cam helped me set up the Conditional Educational Trust. We worked with a legal consultant who specialized in intergenerational wealth protection. The clause was airtight. The child would have full access to the fund only if raised outside of Chelsea and Gavin's legal custody. Cruel? I asked Cam over coffee. Precaution, he said, flat. Smart ones make rules, cowards make apologies. That same week, I signed up to read during story hour at the public elementary school down the road. I told no one. I just showed up, hair brushed, glasses polished, an old copy of Charlotte's Web tucked under my arm. The classroom was quiet when I entered, all crayons and backpack zippers and the faint smell of peanut butter. The teacher smiled, then stepped aside. I sat in the rocking chair like it was a throne I'd forgotten I once deserved. As I read, I saw one little girl in the front row, knees pulled to her chest, fingers twitching in her lap. She wasn't just listening, she was absorbing, word for word, breath by breath. Something in her eyes made me ache. They reminded me of Chelsea's before she learned how to calculate with them. When the story ended, the kids clapped. I almost cried. "Will you come back next week?" the girl asked softly. "I just might," I said. "If you save me a seat?" That night, I made a copy of the letter to my grandchild and placed it in a sealed envelope labeled "Open when safe." It went into my fireproof box next to the new will and a tiny blue sweater I'd saved from Chelsea's first birthday. Some parts of the past still deserved preservation. Outside, the mountains exhaled fog into the dusk. I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto my porch. My phone buzzed against the wood railing. It was Cam. "Cam, we got a court date, final round." The final hearing day arrived. I didn't dress for revenge. I dressed for clarity. The pearls sat against my throat like punctuation, small, elegant, final. I wore a navy sheath dress, low heels, no makeup except the kind that reminded the world I was still very much present. I wasn't there to look frail or forgiven. I was there to be remembered, correctly. Courtroom 3 smelled like paper and polish, tension and truth. The hum of fluorescent lights fought the weight of what was about to unfold. Cam sat to my right in a dark suit, still and calm. Tasha adjusted her blazer and whispered, "Deep breaths. Let the truth do the shouting." Across the aisle, Chelsea twisted her wedding ring like it might disappear if she turned it enough times. Gavin sat beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight. They hadn't spoken to each other since they walked in. The judge entered. Silence dropped like a curtain. Case number 23-1180, Rhodes versus Adler and Adler. Allegations include identity theft, trust fraud, and financial exploitation of an elder. The clerk's voice was flat. Mine was not. Tasha rose and began. We are not here because of a misunderstanding. We are here because of meticulous, sustained betrayal. She moved like she'd rehearsed for a Broadway debut. Firm voice, slow turns, no overkill. She introduced the forensic accountant, who walked the court through every transfer, every shadow account, every misuse of my Social Security number. Then came the testimony. Loan documents bearing my forged signature. A real estate agent confirming Chelsea toured houses under my financial umbrella. Surveillance of Gavin withdrawing funds under an LLC I never authorized. When the screen lit up with a side-by-side comparison, my actual signature versus the one on the second mortgage, Gavin's face cracked. Not with shame, but with calculation. He leaned into his lawyer, whispered, then folded his arms again like nothing had happened. The judge's gavel knocked once. Mr. Adler, do you have a response? Gavin stood. I was under the impression we had power of attorney. You filed for that after the mortgage. The judge interrupted, flipping through papers. You don't need a law degree to recognize the sequence. Chelsea looked up then, finally. I didn't know, she said, standing too. Her voice was trembling. I didn't know he used her name. I thought he said it was an investment for all of us. Tasha raised an eyebrow. And when your mother's utilities were disconnected, when she vanished for 3 weeks, you still assumed it was an investment. I thought she was unstable. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Not in that room. The judge stared at Chelsea for a long moment, then spoke. Mrs. Adler, are you aware that this court obtained testimony from your former nanny, verifying that you discussed hiding funds from your mother, even in the event of medical incapacitation? Chelsea didn't respond. She dropped her gaze to the table. Major twist number 3. The judge turned a page and continued. Furthermore, due to submitted evidence and testimony from Child Protective Services, this court is initiating proceedings to revoke parental guardianship of your unborn child. The room gasped. Chelsea's mouth opened, then closed. Gavin turned to her, betrayed fury contorting his face. You dragged me into this. Enough, the judge barked. The gavel slammed down once more. Full legal restitution is awarded to Mrs. Rhodes. Additionally, Ms. Rhodes has recommended Mr. Camden Wyatt as provisional guardian in the matter of future custody evaluation. Tasha smiled without showing teeth. Cam squeezed my hand beneath the table. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Chelsea was crying now, hand trembling as she reached for Gavin's sleeve. He shook her off. As they were led out, Gavin called over his shoulder to me. You think this makes you a saint? It makes you bitter? No, I said, rising slowly. It makes me finished. I returned home that evening alone, the quiet as deep as a lake. The air smelled like rain and pine. I stepped into the kitchen, lit a single candle, and placed one slice of cake on a ceramic plate. The icing shimmered in the glow. This time, no one was there to knock it out of my hands. The sun was climbing over the Blue Ridge Mountains when I stepped onto the porch with my coffee. That slow golden light broke across the pines like it had been waiting for me all along. I wrapped my cardigan tight and sat back in the cedar rocker, the slats creaking beneath me like an old friend exhaling. Some women run from 70. I met it at the door and poured it coffee. On the little side table beside me sat a thick hardcover. Act Your Age. Why I Didn't. The title was embossed in matte gold, the photo on the back a candid shot of me laughing, caught mid-eye roll. I hadn't intended to publish it, I was just trying to survive. But surviving made me a writer. The phone buzzed against the table. One new message from Cam. I opened it slowly, heart oddly weightless. A photo filled the screen, round cheeks, blinking eyes, the start of a smile still searching for direction. Cam cradled the baby in one arm, holding up a small chalkboard in the other. Meet Eva Rose Wyatt. Safe. Loved. Free. I stared at that photo for longer than I'll admit. My breath caught somewhere behind my ribs. She's got your chin, I whispered, though I didn't know who I was saying it to. Maybe myself. Maybe the ghost of the man whose picture sat in the hallway. I stood, walked back inside. The house smelled of rising dough and lemon zest. Today was my birthday. Again. But this one belonged to me. In the dining room, the table was set with mismatched dishes I'd collected over the years. Sunlight spilled across the wood like a benediction. Fresh hydrangeas bloomed in the center vase. Muffins cooled on the rack. Cam would be here soon. Lenora was bringing her famous quiche. A few neighbors from the retirement book club were already texting for the gate code. It wasn't a gala. It wasn't performative. It was mine. I walked to the mantel, where 2 photos now stood side by side, one of Eva Rose, one of Henry on our honeymoon in Savannah, cheeks sunburned, holding up a dripping scoop of strawberry ice cream. I set a small silver frame between them. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, an old typed invoice from years ago when I'd first learned to use our typewriter. 28 years of unpaid labor, motherhood, services rendered, all of them. Final total, priceless. Invoice void, legacy protected. Underneath, in my own script, I had scrawled, "You're welcome, you're forgiven, you're forgotten." From the kitchen, I pulled out the small vanilla layer cake I'd baked the night before. Pale pink frosting. No fancy fondant, just the way I used to make it when Chelsea was 5 and believed birthday candles could grant real wishes. I placed it in the center of the table and stuck in a single candle. One flame, one life. As guests filtered in, laughter layered into the air like warm syrup. Someone clinked a glass. Lenora pulled me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and lavender oil. "Another year?" she whispered. "No," I said softly. "A brand new one." Cam entered last, Eva's photo tucked in his wallet, already shown to everyone twice. When the time came, everyone sang. Badly, but with heart, and this time, when I leaned forward to blow out that final candle, no one knocked the cake away. No one shouted me down. No one rolled their eyes at joy that refused to shrink itself. Just silence, then applause, then a slice of cake shared without shame.